欢迎大家回来 Welcome back. We have an hour of Q&A. So we welcome all the questions. I think this is the most practical way to talk about this. So we have some youth here. We have some English-speaking adult here. Mostly we're Chinese-speaking. So feel free to ask questions. You can put it in writing if you want. Maybe the question you ask, you feel embarrassed. But then all questions are good questions. There's no bad question per se. So please, right now, if you want to speak, there's a couple microphones at the back. Just raise your hand, and we can pass on the mic. You speak to the mic so that everyone can hear. You can address the question to me or to Pastor Jeremy, who is in Houston. We'll answer accordingly. Okay, to start, I'd like to share about our journey at Fort Bend Community Church about how we come about this sticky faith. When we first started Fort Bend Community Church 24 years ago in 1997, we made willful decisions based on the vision that God had given to us. We want to plant a church with Chinese and also English ministry equally important. So this is a Chinese-English church. At that time, Chinese-speaking congregation about 2 to the English congregation 1. It's 2 to 1. English congregation, there's about 80 youth, about 10 adults. We have about 200 Chinese-speaking. Among them, half of them Cantonese-speaking, half of them Mandarin-speaking. So the ratio from the Chinese to the English is 2 to 1, including the youth. But at the start of the church, we decided we need to prioritize the English ministry. So we give resources. The second staff that we hire is the English pastor / youth pastor. We have an experienced English pastor come on board at the very early of the stage of the life of the church, start ministry. So the first thing we opened with the Chinese. Split the service into Cantonese and into Mandarin. On the English ministry. And then the third staff we hire is a worship pastor. The worship pastor, we want him to be able to lead the Chinese service, also the English service. Well, we put a priority on the English ministry and the youth ministry from the very early on the stage. So about 5 years or 6 years into the church life, we get to know this Fuller Youth Institute. The institute chair is Dr. Chap Clark. He is a youth specialist. Study youth culture and how to reach the youth for Christ. So to make a long story short, we invite Dr. Clark to come to our church to teach us, to guide us in doing youth ministry, reaching the next generation. His book is called Hurt, H-U-R-T. Now it's updated to Hurt 2.0. In that book, in his conversation with us, he talked to us about the hurt of the second generation. We were surprised. What do you talk about? That the second generation is hurt. They have a good life. When they grow up, the parents already prepare everything for them. When they come to church, we have that special places, special services for them. And what do you mean that they are hurt? So we come to a new understanding. Empathy is the first thing. Understand the way they brought up. There's a lot of hurt Many of those hurt, we were told, are coming from the parents. Expectation, high expectation, and groom them in a way that the parents want. And then when they grow up, they find out they are not measuring up. The peer pressure, the social pressure, and create us a lot of hurt. And to understand those hurts is the first step. So we decided to practice some of the teaching that he has for us. Then from then on, every 5 years, we invite some of the speakers to come. We have this Sticky Faith conference every 5 years. Then Chuck Clark retired. His disciple or his major successor, Dr. Cara Powers, also wrote another book called Sticky Faith. The book is translated into Chinese. Inside, they talk about sticky gospel, talk about sticky youth group, talk about this 5-to-1 relationship. All of this, I have talked to you. We put those things into our practice in the church. Some of them works, some of them does not. So we practice some of the things as a church, this Sticky Faith. Then after Sticky Faith, there's another book called Growing Young. How do we grow the church younger generation? Keychain leadership, empathy, Jesus gospel, Jesus message, neighborhood, pay attention to your neighbor, social justice issue. Then the book also talk about prioritizing youth everywhere, talk about passing on their leadership, and invite them come to the leadership table. So we were taught, we learned, and we put all of this into our practice. Our church begins to have our first English elder is 36 years old. And then we have young deacons from the English congregation, 20-some years old. It's my son's age. And my son said, "Daddy, why do you want him to be a deacon? He's my age." And I said, "Yeah, why not? Invite them into the table." So our council have 20-some years old deacons, and also we have a 30-some years old elder. Invite them to the leadership table. And in everywhere, we try to prioritize the youth, the next generation everywhere. We also engage in the community, care for our neighbor. Our neighbors is important. They find a way to express their spirituality for the next generation. Keychain leadership, empathy, we talk about those things. So next year, in February, we invite Dr. Powell to come to our church. His son now is going to Rice University to study, so this becomes an incentive, which is in Houston, for him to visit Houston. So we have his commitment to come to Houston next February. We invite your church to come and join us through video, and then he will teach us about his newest book is Growing With. Talk about parenting youth. How are you grow with the next generation? And then I just passed on, the book just came out 2 months ago, is about the 3 most important questions the next generation asks. Last night we talked about that: identity, belonging, and also purpose. This book, I give a copy to your church. And all of this, we need to practice. It's not just theory. So this is our journey. It doesn't mean we have arrived or achieved. We just struggle in many areas. This 5-to-1 concept is very hard. Some people feel very reluctant to engage in cross-generation relationship. But nonetheless, from the leadership level, we want this to be our cornerstone of a philosophy of ministry, so that we're able to bring the next generation in a sticky faith situation. Now, that is our journey we'd like to share with you. All right, let me open some questions. This is for Jeremy. I think most of the questions are for you, Jeremy. All right.
All right, I'm ready.
What is your favorite pair from your collection? I mean, is this...
Oh, this must be...
I know you know the answer.
Yeah, you guys can hear me, right? Okay, good. Yeah, so last night I shared with our young people about my collection of shoes. I do collect a lot of shoes, and actually, funny story is the reason why I actually started collecting shoes is because of the young man who discipled me from a very early age. His name is Johnny, and he's actually our missions pastor's son at FBCC, and he got me started. He was really interested in collecting shoes, and so that, I mean, along with faith, was also passed down to me. So my favorite pair of shoes would probably be the Jordan 3s, and I currently are yeah my current favorite pair are black, these black and red ones. So I don't have a picture on me, but if you look at my Zoom account when I sign in, there's a pair of shoes, and those are also part of my favorite. Um, yeah, nothing
So
to
the
do with
first
sticky face,
question
but
is,
yeah, thanks for asking the
can you
question.
show us your collection?
Oh, it's not here. I'm in our office today, so it's at home. Um, but yeah, I don't
Okay.
keep any in the office.
So this is
Yeah.
a question also for you. What do you think are some of the most important quality to have or not to have in building a relationship from a parent to a child so that the child can feel safe sharing and being vulnerable with their parents? What are some of the quality that you think the most important quality to have a relationship
That is a
that
really great question.
the children, a child can feel safe to talk to their parents? I think this is talking about the parents' quality. Jeremy,
Yeah, for
our handsome man.
I would say having the mentality of kind of what Pastor Brian talked about earlier. Are you a student of your student? A lot of times, especially when young people are learning about a bunch of things, they're really struggling through identity, expectations, who they are, what they believe in, and they don't know. And the big question for them is, who am I? Where do I belong? And for us as parents, if we have the attitude, the mentality of, I'm going to be a student of my child, a student of a student, you dedicate that process to learning about what your child is going through, learning about who they are, and walking alongside them. Yes, they're going to need some times where it's going to be instructions. They're going to need guidance for sure. And so there will be those moments. But everything that we talked about, empathizing, understanding, taking the time to learn about them and who they are, that's going to be extremely key into establishing a place where your child feels safe in saying, hey, mom, hey, dad, I messed up. I did something wrong. I know I'm not supposed to do that. And then if they come to you and they only fear punishment, fear your reaction to how things are going to go, they're not going to tell you. They're not going to. And so having that mentality of there's still, I'm not saying that you cannot have consequences and that you cannot punish accordingly, but I am saying that if your whole mentality is strictly about, I'm going to teach you and tell you what to do all the time, and I'm not going to learn about who you are, that's not going to create a safe environment. And you want to add anything, Pastor Brian? I think you should add something. Yeah.
I echo what you have said. I think being a learner is a very important quality to be able to build a relationship with your child. Learn the way they behave or they think, being a learner. I learn a lot from Pastor Jeremy. When I come to preaching, I think I know the Bible pretty well. I have a good education and I preach for a long time. I thought I am very experienced preacher. But when I come to preaching to the next generation, I humble myself and I have a lot to learn from Pastor Jeremy and also the younger staff. So we have a preaching team meeting every week. So when I need to preach to English congregation, I always listen to them. How do I express this idea to them? And they come back with some very, very interesting idea, something that I have never thought of in preaching by myself. So learning how to express yourself, learning how to say this in when you communicate with your child. Make them feel vulnerable. Make them feel that you are vulnerable. You are learning. When you share, don't just share about your successes. Also share about your failure. When a parent is able to share what they have done wrong, which can do it over again, this opens a door for them to be vulnerable too. When our adult parents, sometimes we want so much for them to learn from good example. So we'll always tell them about our success story, like Jeremy's daddy. His daddy is a good man, now a missionary to Germany. Is a godly man, father and mother. They are very godly. But as they grow up, they want to teach their kids the right way. It's very hard to be vulnerable yourself to your kids. When you become vulnerable, the kids will be willing to share their struggle also. Tell them, last night I have a fight with your daddy. And then tell them, this is something we don't agree. So how do we resolve? Or I'm still angry. Talk to your child, open up yourself, tell them about your successful story. Don't just tell them, when I come to America, I only have one briefcase and one guitar. Now you have a full load of stuff going to college. Now, don't ask me for anything else. Now the kids will not tell you anything if it is like this. You always is the best model. Your way is the best way. Become vulnerable. Become sincere, truthful. Talk about your successes, also about your failure. When was the last time you talked to your kids about your spiritual journey? About how you come to Christ, how you date your mother, how do you make decisions? Tell them about your success and also your failure. Being a learner, learn the way to express yourself. Jeremy talked about his shoes collection. My son also. I think at that age group, everybody collects shoes. And I was pretty angry when my son was a teenager. He wanted to buy a $200 pair of shoes. I thought, no way. Your dad is a poor pastor. So buy a $200 pair of shoes, no way. So try to understand why they want that pair of Jordan 5 or 11 or 12. Very simple, because everyone is buying it. Because this is the coolest things in that time. Now, all those shoes are in the closet. In my house, collecting dust. My son would not even bring them to Boston, to their own home. They think nothing about those shoes now. But at that time, it was everything. So try to understand why you want to buy this. And put yourself in their shoes. How to stand up to peer pressure. How do you know what is right, what is wrong? Be a learner. Asking questions. Don't make judgment. This is maybe the best way. Now, it's not easy, especially for Chinese parents. Not easy at all. Because this is the way we brought up. When was the last time your father apologized to you? When was the last time your father said to you, I'm sorry? When was the last time your father admitted his struggle? So our own parents always have a very serious face, not opening up. You never know. Right until my mother was very ill, the last couple years of his life, I began she began to share about her story. And it was the first time I know some of the things that happened to her when she was young. That was when she was 79 years old. That she felt comfortable to talk to me about her upbringing. I did not know that my grandfather was not my real grandfather. My mother was from another grandfather. And then because of war, she was separated. And then my grandmother married second time. And then my grandfather on my mother's side was not my real grandfather. I knew only when I was 40-some years old, when my mother was 70, 80 years old, just before he passed away. She talked to me one day about, do you know what? This is what happened when I was 8 years old. Your grandfather is really not your grandfather. I say, what? Why are you telling me this at this time? So we were brought up in a way that we are not supposed to know all the secret of the family history, not about the struggle of our parents. So when we become our parents to our own children, we'll behave the same way. So when you want to talk to your children, make them feel vulnerable to talk to you, you first need to be vulnerable. You first need to be a learner. Okay, anything to add, Pastor Jeremy?
No, that was really good, Pastor. The only difference is I still, not like Pastor Brian's son, I still wear my shoes. They're in my closet, not my parents. But yeah, excellent question. I think that, like what Pastor Brian said,
Next time
this is a journey. This is an infinite game.
You need to donate your shoes for auctions.
I'll think about it. I'll have to pray about it. But yeah, I think exactly what Pastor Brian's saying. This is a journey. It's an infinite game. You will continuously be learning about your child. And the phases that Pastor Brian talked about earlier today, parents, as soon as you figure out what your child thinks he or she is, there's going to be something new and different based upon the stage of their life. And so this is a continual process. And each time, your role will change a little bit each time, going from more hands-on to more hands-off. Going from parent/guardian into coach, into what Pastor Brian was talking about with his daughter, talking from an adult to adult perspective. And that's not an easy transition, but it is doable. It's very doable if you and I, as parents, are willing to be students of our students.
Okay, the next question I think relate to what I shared this morning. Also, Pastor Jeremy, you can answer that first, maybe from your own experience. And then this question is, my child is now a grown-up adult already. And in the past, there are a lot of hurts in the relationship. Maybe you have done something wrong, make some mistakes. So how do I handle this? How do I undo the damage? Now, from a younger generation, we'll talk about. Now, no parents is perfect. Agree? No parents is perfect. I make a lot of stupid mistakes. When I think about it, I could not sleep. And then, wow, how could I that foolish to say this or do this to my own children? So no parents are perfect. So how do we undo the damage? Looking for the past, a lot of regrets, a lot of hurts, still in the relationship. So we asked Pastor Jeremy to share from your experience. How do we, from a younger generation perspective, how should the parents to deal with this? Then I'll come back to answer this question from my perspective. All right, Pastor Jeremy.
Yeah, I think my parents are very very traditional Chinese parents, and it wasn't until very recently where we would really have these kinds of conversations about the hurt that my sisters and I experienced growing up in our family. Now, a lot of people think hurt and then they think extremes. It wasn't like my parents were uncaring or unloving, but yeah, as Chinese parents, my parents worked very hard. They provided for our family. I think from my experience, where the hurt, I don't think the goal is to undo the hurt, but to really be able to come to a common understanding of why those things happened. And for most young people, they're not looking for a quick solution or a quick heal. A lot of times we're looking for the fastest way to put a Band-Aid on top of the wound or on top of the hurt. And that's not simply what we're looking for. The idea for us to begin rebuilding this relationship has to start with empathy, has to start with understanding, and taking the time to really understand what the other person is saying. The last time my parents came back, we had a conversation, and I tried to explain to them about some of the hurt that I was experiencing. However, my parents just simply could not understand what I was saying. I tried to speak in Chinese to them, and I guess my Chinese is not adequate enough. Try to go towards the same language. I tried explaining myself in English, but my parents and I just couldn't get on the same page as to what was going on. And I was very hurt. I think I was very hurt by my parents' response. However, through all of this, the relationship is not broken. Our young people, we long for a good relationship with our parents. It's something we innately and deeply desire. I don't like having conflict with my parents. I don't like not being able to connect with my parents. And that disruption is very, very, very difficult for our young people. And so the idea of fixing the problem, I think we should go ahead and not throw it out, but let's not make it the goal to fix or be the solution. Rather, to open the dialogue and begin the process of healing. And that just starts with a conversation, and that starts with, hey, I just want to hear you out. I just want to listen to what you went through, and I just want to understand from your perspective of some of the things that maybe went wrong. And that conversation is really, really hard. Because when you open that door, you're asking them to share something about themselves that might reflect poorly upon you as the parent. And it's really easy when we hear things that are either critical of who we are, our parenting style, it's really easy for us to want to defend ourselves and be like, well, hey, you don't understand my perspective. But that conversation is not about who we are as parents, rather about who our children are. And that, I will say, is one of the hardest questions to ask because of the response that you may get. Now, I'll turn the time over to you, Pastor Brian.
All right. Thank you, Pastor Jeremy. I want to answer this question in just two points. Number one, of course, we apologize for the things that we have done wrong in the past, hurt our children. Now, if you have not done it, apologize, go ahead and do it. It's time from a sincere apology, confession. This is something I've done wrong. Now, if you have done this, it will open a door for reconciliation. But just verbal apology goes just the first step. They look for a relationship that heals. You need to look at the thing that is wrong, whether that is continuing of doing. Sometimes we apologize for things we have done wrong. If that continue to happen, the apology is not sincere, right? Now, most of the hurt that I have seen are falling into the following category. Number one, children are hurt when they grow up. It's by the relationship between husband and wife, between the daddy and the mommy. If the daddy mommy fight all the time, the children grow up very hurt, very insecure. So when you apologize, hey, I did not provide a good environment for you when you grow up. There's family fight all the time. Your daddy and your mommy always angry with each other. I'm sorry. Now that's a first good step. But have you worked on that relationship now so that your relationship, your spousal relationship, will become a healing process for your children? So this is very important. Apology, verbal apology is the first step. But whether that relationship is able to get healed, it's about whether there is changed behavior. The second category of hurt that I can see most of the time is that your expectation, unreal or unrealistic expectation on your children. They felt the hurt. They felt not meeting up to your expectation. So you apologize. I'm so sorry when you're young. I make all this request to you. I want you to be able to be a swimmer, a pianist, a violinist, to be a Chinese speaking, to be able to speak Chinese and get well in school and then go to Harvard and all of that. I'm so sorry that I put all this expectation on you. On top of that, I want you to be a good Christian. Now, whether you are, after you apologize, whether that expectation continue subtly and verbally, not verbally, and whether that carry on the demand, whether the relationship has changed to adult. Now, when your behavior changes, healing is much easier. Apology followed by behavior change. That is a crucial in reconciliation. Now, second point I'd like to bring is I want to encourage the next generation. We all come from broken home in some way. We cannot blame our success or failure based on just our parents' performance. You need to get away from that. I love young people here. I want to speak to you too. You need to get on with your life with God. Yes, we all have imperfect past. Our past have something we wish it could be done differently. But you are responsible for your own spiritual growth. Don't blame your parent, just blame, oh, you have done this, so I never go to church again. Or you have not done this, so I will not believe in God anymore. Now, if you are thinking like this, you are setting up yourself to a big failure. This is a lie that Satan wants you to believe in. We make our own choice, especially in our faith, our walk with God. You are responsible for your own spiritual actions. We try to heal from the past, but then at the same time, you are planning for the future. You're making choices for the future. So, forgive your parents and heal the broken relationship is the key to your happiness. As Jeremy have said, we all want to have a good relationship with a parent. That relationship is vital. It's vital. So learn to forgive, learn to heal. Now, these are the 2 points that I'd like to make. The last question that I have here is then open up to the floor. It's about, last night we talked about father being the key to raising up our next generation? What about if the father at home is not perfect? Maybe not even a Christian. How do we deal with this? Or when the father is not a spiritual leader at home, not studying the Bible, not reading, just a social Christians. How do we, with obviously this may be a question from the mother, how do we bring our kids when father's role is not the most ideal? How do I change my husband? That's the bottom line. How do I change my husband so that he becomes a spiritual man in the house? So, Pastor Jeremy, you have the first tip.
This is a really, really tough question. Like Pastor Brian said, I would start off with this idea of what does the marriage relationship look like? I think that it is really hard when the husband and the wife are not on the same page. When we want to instill value, we want to instill faith into the next generation, yet one of the parents, specifically the father, is not involved. I think from my perspective, I think that it's not our job to change people. And so if your goal is to have the father change or to be a specific ideal or you have a specific expectation, I think that is, I think honestly we need to move away from that. However, there's a thing that goes on in the Chinese home, which is called unspoken expectations. And a lot of times we just don't say the things that we expect out of other people. We expect people to just know. So for instance, I would mow the lawn, I would take care of all of the bushes, I would go outside, I would spend a whole afternoon on my off day, and I would spend the whole time cleaning the yard. My wife would come home from work, and the first thing she said to me would be, I'm hungry, what are we having for dinner? And my expectation, I was hurt because I was thinking, you don't appreciate me. You don't get all of the things that I'm doing. Can't you see that? Don't you know what I spent all afternoon outside. I'm sweaty, I'm gross, and now all you can think about is your stomach. Right? And that is from my perspective. However, just asking her like, hey, I have this expectation, like when I am doing these things around the house, like if you could just say like, hey, if you simply acknowledge the fact that I did these things, that would make me feel appreciated. And a lot of times that's not happening in our Chinese cultural homes because these are just called what we call unspoken expectations. And each and every one of us as individuals have something that motivates us. And the question is, what really is the motivating factor? So I feel like I don't have enough experience to directly answer this question, but I think that one of the things that we can work on is having our expectations at least verbalized. It doesn't have to be like, just because you say it doesn't mean that is the ultimate goal. Like with any other relationship, you want to have a conversation. If the expectation is unrealistic, that person then needs to respond and say, hey, like, I don't think I can do that. And then you work through those expectations. So for instance, if it's this conversation, if my wife told me, hey, I would like you to be the spiritual leader of our home. Okay, great. What does that look like? What does that mean? I know that you now have that expectation of me, but what does it mean for me to be the spiritual leader of the house? Does it mean that I am taking our family to church on Sundays? Does it mean that I'm leading our family in devotions? What does that mean? What does it look like? And begin that conversation specifically in the marriage relationship. And so I don't want to, yeah, I think that would be my main piece of advice. But I feel like, Pastor Brian, I'm going to let you talk more because I think you have a lot more just hands-on experience with this.
I work with a family. It was brought to my attention about this couple. They have 3 children. All the older one go to middle school, and then 2 is still elementary school. The wife become more and more spiritual in recent years. Want to follow God, read the Bible, serve in the church, and very much spiritual mother. As a full-time mother at home. Now, the husband react in a totally opposite way. When the wife become more spiritual, the husband become less spiritual. And when wife, it go to a point that whenever the wife show up in small group, the husband will not come. Then when the wife is not here, the husband will go to small group. And then lately, it became even more severe is that the husband now not even come to worship service if the wife comes. Now, the dynamic in that house is very complicated. But this kind of dynamics, it happens a lot of time. You say the role of the wife, when it becomes dominant, become the head of the house in spiritual way, that husband most of the time, or very easily, take a step back. And then why do I need to compete with you? And then we'll have an adverse effect of the opposite direction. So how to deal with this? When we see behavior or in spiritual life that we want the husband to change, and seeing that behavior has an impact on the children. So of course you are concerned. Of course you want your husband to change. He plays a very important role. By forcing or making more demands, you have opposite result. So the best way is not to force your husband to be spiritual, not to be the mother to your husband. Do this, do this, do this, do this. Study the Bible. Read in front of your children. Now, these are 5 spiritual books you need to read so that your children can be spiritual. Now, come to parenting class with me. If you don't come, you are a bad father. Now, if you do this, the husband will run away from this. So the best way is not to play your role of the wife. You know, respect your husband, and he's the spiritual head. And he is responsible to God, and you are also responsible to God. And do your part. Pray for him through prayer, and then ask God to change him. And then be a good wife, supporting him, meeting his needs, and able to talk when there are opportunity to talk about your desire, your wishes, your desire. Not in a pressured way, but in a sincere, in an intimate manner. And voice or talk to your husband about your needs to be a spiritual leader at home. And then also have some good model. Sometimes it's not that he doesn't want to be a spiritual leader, but he just don't have good model. So maybe in a small group, in church, able to have some deeper relationship with some godly man, able to have model to be successful. The church, from a church perspective programming, consider to have some men's group, fathers group. You know, when I was a father, I initiated a father group. So about the same age, our father come together and we share. When women are not in the room, the men are different animals. They talk freely. They admit their vulnerability. Oh yeah, I'm bad. But now women in the room, you just, the face, that honor, that respect. So men's group are important, are a good vehicle to do this. A men discipleship group, sit together around the table, just men try to follow God, encourage one another. And that is some way to change it. And at the end of the day, if he doesn't change in the way that you want, trust God. It may not be the most ideal situation that, like what we're talking about, but then God have mercy. You play your part. You trust God to bring your children up in a godly way. In an imperfect world, in a sinful world, it happens all the time. We are not responsible for others' behavior, and we are responsible for what God asks us to do. So do your part. Be a faithful wife, a faithful mother, and demonstrate your spiritual walk with God to your children. And let God to work with your husband so he can become a spiritual father too. Now for father who is non-Christian, who are non-Christians, is very hard. The partnership, the believing partner and the unbelieving partner sometimes is very hard. And in terms of values, in terms of decision-making process, it's very difficult. So God have mercy. Just pray in this situation that God will bring salvation to this family as a whole. Now, your children, God loves them too. Even though in a situation like this, I can see there are godly children being raised in this situation. In all forms of life, God has grace, God is gracious, and he can do it in spite of, not because of. And this is my encouragement to you. Okay, this is the next questions about how to make your children talk and willing to share their thoughts. How do you start spiritual conversations? A lot of time when we talk to our teenager especially, how's school? Fine. What have you learned in church today? Nothing. One word. And then when you want to talk, how's your Bible reading today? Fine. Everything is just fine. How do you make them talk? How do you have a vibrant conversation with your child in general and in specific? How do you talk to him? Initiate spiritual conversation. Pastor Jeremy, you are an expert.
I don't know if I'm an expert. The great thing about what we're doing, especially now, is the things that just to hear Pastor Brian give those examples. Those are our church, our kids, and to hear you guys like laugh and just it sounds like it's the same thing, which is great. It's wonderful because we all know that teenagers or our children, to a certain extent, are about the same. I would say this, couple of things. First, it's what kind of questions are you asking? Now, when it comes to younger kids, asking such a broad question, how was your day? That maybe is a little bit too broad, a little bit too open for them. Especially if you have elementary school kids, what's going on is when they go to school, they're holding it all together. They're trying to make sure that they're following the rules, they're doing everything they can. And then when they get home, they're trying to figure out how to just let all of that out, relax, because they're in a safe space at that time. And when you ask a question such as so broad, like, oh, how was your day? The scope of what happened throughout the entire day may be a little bit too much for them. So maybe going for something a little bit more specific in questions, like, hey, what did you eat for lunch today? If you didn't pack their lunch, right? If they let's say they eat lunch at school. What did you eat? Did you eat pizza or did you eat a hamburger today? And then what that does for them mentally is it helps them recall what's going on throughout their day, and then be able to tell you, hey, I had pizza today. Now, one of the things that our kids love doing is being right. Right? And more than anyone, they love being right. And so if you say something wrong, they're going to correct you. And what that does is initially it initiates the conversation to begin going back and forth, back and forth. Now, as your kids get older, especially for teenagers and young adults, asking more broad questions is going to be it's going to be easier for them to understand. However, along the same note, asking them the whole scope of the day, our teenagers go through 7 periods, 8, sometimes 8, depending on what your school district is, 8 periods a day. All of these things happen. And instead of asking a general question of how was your day, maybe one of the things that I like to tell our parents is asking specific questions and being consistent with that. So for instance, the question of what was something that was good, something that we really were excited about today? What was something that was a little bit frustrating? What was something that was a little bit hard for you today? Asking, those are still very open-ended questions, but it's triggering their brains to think through, man, I really enjoyed this part of my day and I didn't enjoy this part of my day. And then consistently asking them, they may respond, they may not. It kind of just depends. And like we said at the very beginning, learning about who your child is. Every child is different. And if you have multiple kids, you understand this more than anybody else. And so the whole idea is, especially if you want to get to the point of spiritual conversation, you must learn about them first. You must learn about them first and asking questions about them. And I think at that point, it's not about expressing our opinion about what's going on in their lives, but asking them what their opinion is. One of the best statements one of the things that we train all of our youth leaders and all of our parents is what we call reflective statements. And so, for instance, you say, hey, what was really hard about today? Oh man, physics was incredibly hard. I didn't understand anything my teacher said. One of our reflective statements is something like, wow, that sounds really frustrating. And then just leaving it at that. And what that reflective statement does, it reflects back to them in a feeling and an emotion. And if that's right, they'll say, yeah, it was really frustrating. But if it was wrong, they'll tell you, I wasn't really frustrated. I was just confused. And what that does is you're just opening the door for them to express themselves. And I think that's going to be really key. And now keep in mind, this takes a lot of practice, because what's going on in our brains is if our student says, hey, Mom, I really struggled in physics today, our brain immediately goes, let me find you a physics tutor. We jump to a solutions-based answer rather than an empathic response. We want them to, if the goal of the conversation is for them to talk, we need to give them that safe space. And so encouraging them by using these reflective statements like, wow, that sounds really tough. Or, oh, tell me more. That's one of the best responses that we can have as parents, because it just invites them into a space of conversation rather than us being, hey, how's school? Good. All right. End of conversation. And I think that is going to be really key. And keep in mind, all of these things take practice. I'm still working on practicing these things with our youth. I've been doing this for 10 years now, and I still have this idea that as soon as a young person comes to me and talks to me about these things, I want to fix their problems. But that's not why they're here. That's not why they're talking to me, right? And so it's just like our parents, when they want to have conversations with you. I mean, not what Pastor Brian said is true. Sometimes they don't want to have conversations, and that's okay. But the consistency, continually asking them, continually engaging them, showing that you're really interested in what's going on in their lives, that's going to be really key too.
Thank you, Pastor Jeremy. I only have one thing to add. Conversation is an expression of a relationship. So when there's no conversation or lack of conversation between two parties, it is a demonstration of the relationship that is frozen, or there's cold, or there's not deep, superficial. So when you talk about, oh, my child is not talking to me, it's an indication of a relationship that it has some real issue. So work on that and know what's going on in that relationship. Conversation is one thing. And one thing I've learned is that when a baby growing up, naturally, they want to express themselves. My grandson is only 8 months old, but he's very responsive. When you make a face to him, he will laugh. When you do something, he'll respond by doing the same thing. So children, when they grow up, by nature, they want to be relating to you. He's very expressive. But unfortunately, in the growing up process, there's a lot of inhibitor that happens. Prevent that intimacy, that expression to be coming out. So when the relationship get distant, then conversation will be less. My suggestion is you want to talk to your kids about spiritual conversation. You need to take the whole relationship in view. Evaluate your relationship with your child. Are they close to you? Are you able to be vulnerable to them? Are they able to talk to you in other areas of their lives? And then spiritual conversation is a part of that relationship. And then also there are stages too. Teenager, by nature, they push parents away. They don't want to talk to you about. And talking to a girl is very different than talking to a boy. A lot of things to learn. When teenager girls growing up, well, a lot of emotion, physically she's changing, and then she's trying to find out who she is, and then whether she's pretty, or she's tall, or she's popular. So there are a lot of emotion going on in a girl's life going through teenager time. When a young adult, it's different. So you need to learn the stages of your child they're going through. Talking to a boy is very difficult. Talking to different than talking to a boy. Find the right time for this conversation. When she is very emotional, or when he's very distracted, you don't talk to him about what is Genesis 3 is all about. When your boy is on the video game, okay, and then trying to achieve certain level, or his friend is waiting on the other side of the world into that video game, and you want to, hey, son, let's have a Bible study on Genesis 3. What do you think about Adam and Eve? And then he will have no response. When a girl's very emotional, feel in his Facebook, not too many like her post. So she's very upset, waiting for that number to grow. And then you want to talk to her, hey, girls, what do you think about the pastor's sermon this morning? Of course, she would say, fine, and then go back to the Facebook, trying to find out how many more likes that she has. So that is, finding the right timing is very crucial. Talk to other parents about how to talk to your kids. What are some of the conversation that will lead to more conversation? Like Jeremy said, the way you ask those questions is important. And also the way you respond to those questions are important too. If they say a lot of things to you and you have no response, okay, I got it. Then next time they will not very eager to share. You'll respond. When you talk to you, and do you look to them eye to eye? Yeah, tell me more. Your face expression tells a lot. Your response matters too. All right, time is up. I want to open to the floor. Any one question that you have? We have a mic here. All this written question. Maybe you have a live question. We may have a couple of minutes to 11:35. Anyone, you have a question? No? So our relationship really not that close. Any question? No? Okay, turn the time to Pastor Peter.